My name is Tarmack, and this is a performance and gameplay review of Gears of War 4 on PC. The game was released on October 11th for Xbox One and PC with a base price of $59.99 US. If you're looking for it on PC though, you'll have to have Windows 10 with the anniversary update and buy it from the Windows Store, as it's not on Steam. I need to preface this by saying I'm one of those terrible people who only ever had a chance to play the original Gears of War and a wee bit of the second game. I dabbled in the multiplayer, but for the most part it was the main campaign that drew me in. This review was completed on an Intel i7-5820K with 16GB of RAM and a GTX 970, which was also doing the screen capture. I was also provided review code by Microsoft. Some minor story elements will be discussed, but will remain spoiler-free so that you can enjoy the game if you pick it up yourself. Where to begin? We'll start with the good. The game looks absolutely gorgeous. Lighting and water effects are great, but where the look really shines is with the wind and the physics effects. One of the parts of the game that you'll run into are these windstorms, which toss objects around and can damage you with a roaming lightning ball. The scenes with those windstorms are really intense, and as I mentioned, they just look amazing. Seeing the trees blowing in the wind in normal areas and such as well really adds to the ambiance and gives a feeling of real chaos in the world, as though everything is just falling apart. You play through a bit of a prologue as a nameless player character, but your main character is J.D. Fenix, the son of Marcus for those familiar with the series. And as is standard Gears gameplay, you're flanked by two other NPCs, Kait and Del, and the premise behind the beginning of all of this is that Kait's mother is an outsider, quote-unquote, running a settlement that has lost power. Fenix and Del are former cogs, the military government, and they've defected. The world is otherwise at peace, with the Locust having been defeated, of course, per the previous games, and your job is to find a machine that will help the settlement restore its power. The gameplay is really responsive. Actions are quick, guns feel heavy, and even the little pistol has got some kick to it. You'll recognize all of your favorites, including, of course, the Lancer chainsaw assault rifle. There are plenty of other weapons that you can pick up along the way, with some much larger versions that pack a punch, but slow your movement down, and turrets as well. It plays like I remember Gears 1 and 2, but by the same token, everything feels just a little more crisp than I remember it. Rolling away from an explosion, circling back around a wall and ducking down, quick reload times for some added damage, though admittedly, I wish the QuickTime reload system displayed by the target reticle instead of in the top right of the screen. I also love the areas. Everything from a clean cityscape construction site to dank alleyways with alien goo strewn about well marks your descent into chaos and awful territory. There are a few instances of destructible terrain which really surprised the player and made me panic on occasion, which was a cool experience to have. And did I mention that the game is gorgeous? I should take the time to quickly mention a few other things the game has on offer that I haven't yet had time to check out. In a return to form, Gears of War 4 has gone back to a two-player co-op campaign. I didn't have the chance to test this out playing solo, but I'm always glad to see features like this, which are so rare these days. Versus modes include core, competitive, and cooperative, each of which having multiple modes with various rule sets like team deathmatch, only one life, etc. I'd also like to give props because you can host matches on a LAN. It's also got a multiplayer staple of the series in the Horde mode, which from what I've heard is incredibly complex and much improved over previous versions. Horde mode is essentially a wave-based multiplayer mode where you place defenses and, well, defend a location. If there's interest, I may delve into it in a future video. I'm definitely going to give it a try when I have a chance though, one way or another. Now, the game isn't without its problems. For starters, I've got to say I'm not impressed with my first foray into the Windows 10 store. I had to update to the Windows 10 anniversary patch, which managed to break my master boot record, so after a few lively discussions with my computer, and about 4 hours later I managed to finally get that bit installed. And I started downloading the game from the store, only to find out that it doesn't really resume downloads very well, if at all. I had an issue while downloading the game, which is over 70 gigabytes by the way, which resulted in a reboot and having to start again after having downloaded 40 gigs already. So you'll want to leave this download overnight if you can. That said, once it was installed, it booted up quickly from my SSD and I have had no game breaking or system breaking issues of any kind. No soft or hard locks, no major performance issues, and no issues capturing footage. The game does have a few minor buggy issues where it comes to physics. One, for example, is how the characters seem to act as large blocks, so you can stand on the head of one of your compatriots if you happen to jump off a ledge before they have moved on. Relatively minor stuff as well, such as objects clipping through one another, but with how much is going on the screen, it's not something that most people would ever notice. I'm not a huge fan of some of what I would describe as shoot here mechanics as well. Shooting engines out of a helicopter is fine, but then that gets translated into a shoot engines out of a large plane mechanic, upon which the back opens up for you to shoot the quote engine end quote inside, all while on a motorcycle. The scene was wickedly intense to be sure, but it felt more than a little contrived. And last is a standard criticism of the series, which can only be referred to by its medical diagnosis, a terminal case of chest-high wall syndrome. Just like the first and second Gears, as well I imagine in Gears 3 and Judgment, the game is filled with conveniently placed little walls, which I guess are more waist height than chest height, but that's how the joke goes. Now, they've done a much better job of trying to hide them by having some destructible terrain, but you will know before every encounter that an encounter is coming up because you're about to walk into an area that looks like the builder only got half done. I'd like to see more variety in shape, and maybe even go as far as to suggest that almost all of these little walls should be destructible. At least that way, you couldn't just hang back behind a single wall and not move until the encounter was over. It would increase the pacing a little bit and make firefights seem a little more urgent. So let's talk about options and performance. Gears 4 has a benchmark tool within the game so you can see how your system performs. I'll be running footage of that benchmark while chatting about performance. The Coalition knows damn well what they're doing when it comes to the Unreal 4 engine. I almost hesitate at this point to call Gears of War 4 a PC port. This strikes me, given the Microsoft attempt to make Windows 10 and Xbox One ubiquitous, as a native version. I could be off my rocker, but the game runs so well, with my rig getting a solid 60 frames per second with very rare drops on near ultra settings, for most things at least, that I honestly believe the game was designed with PC in mind first, and then paired back for the Xbox One. It is that good. The system again that I'm doing all of this on is both running the game and capturing the footage. It's an i7 5820K, 16GB of RAM, and a GTX 970 with the game installed on a solid-state drive. Honestly, I couldn't be happier with the performance that I got out of this title. And like any proper Unreal 4 game, you've got more options than any reasonable human will ever need. Resolution options from 720p all the way up to Ultra HD, which is 3840 by 2160, and a huge number of variants in between. A frame rate limiter and VSync to make sure you've got the best performance to match your monitors. Unfortunately, I don't have higher than 60Hz monitors to test the upper limits on the frame rate though. We'll just run down the list really quickly so you can see just how many options that there are. Texture detail for character, world, effects, and lighting, as well as anisotropic filtering, anti-aliasing, draw distance, world detail, character detail, and the ever-worthless motion blur. A raft of options for adjusting lighting and shadows for things like the quality of the shaft, teehee, lens flare, bloom, shadow quality, and ambient occlusion, then into post-processing for reflection, refraction, and particle spawn rates. Finally, I want to draw your attention to a set of uncommon options at the bottom, depth of field and subsurface scattering, which are under real-time cinematics. Like a number of other games, many of the cutscenes are not pre-rendered, and they have their own graphical settings. So let's just say that you can customize Gears of War 4 to precisely how you want it to look, whether you're playing on a supercomputer or on a potato. The game supports keyboard and mouse or controller at your leisure. Keyboard keys are rebindable, but the controller buttons aren't, which given the freedom of options thus far does seem like a bit of an oddity, though I suspect not many console or controller players actually rebind buttons. And finally, for those of you with color blindness, never you worry, the game has you covered under accessibility. So, what's the verdict? Well, let's recap. The game is drop-dead gorgeous and runs like a damn gazelle. It's well optimized, and I think maybe unfair to call it a port. The story is good with some cringy lines, but otherwise enjoyable. The gameplay feels responsive and solid. The areas have a lot of variety in art direction, but also open versus closed spaces. And the gunplay has a real heft to it, which makes those regular kills awesome, but the chainsaw kills even better. It's got the stock standard Gears of War issues, which come with a cover-based shooter that hasn't really innovated away from areas that become obvious encounter points, and while there are some graphical bugs as far as physics and clipping issues, they're not as noticeable because of the heavy action. And finally, some of the shoot this target mechanics feel a little bit lame. Gears of War 4 is a game that I can absolutely recommend. I had a great time playing it for this review, and I will continue to play it, most likely starting with the Horde mode next. The game came out on October 11th with a $59.99 US base price or $99 US for the Ultimate Edition, which includes the game and the Season Pass. And if I may make a recommendation, for those who are picking the game up for Xbox, This title is part of the Windows 10 Play Anywhere system, so you'll want to buy a digital version if you can, because that way you get both the Xbox One version and the PC version attached to your account. Buying a disc-based Xbox One version doesn't have this functionality. This has been a review of Gears of War 4 by the Coalition on Windows 10 for PC. Please do subscribe if you enjoy my content, but make sure to check out a few other videos as I do far more game-related material than just reviews. And you can follow me at Gnomecast on Twitter for game industry discussion. My name is Tarmack.
Shit, they're gonna mess up my fucking tomatoes!
Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.